I just gotta say off the top that this is like our 50th take.
Yeah, it is.
Of this. So this is it. If it sucks, it's because we've done it 1,000 times by now.
Yep.
But yeah, we really recently did a video on Dean Koontz where we talked about kind of the cons of, not even the pros, really,
nope,
just the cons of sticking with Koontz.
His hair sucks.
There was a point where I loved Koontz and he could do no wrong. I say that, but really there was some times where I was like, that was an okay book. It wasn't his greatest.
Mm-hmm.
But
there
I
was
never
no apes.
Yeah, I never hated him until Fear Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, dude.
Then you feared everything.
Yeah, really. But I'm always willing to give Koontz a chance if the chance comes along. And I guess I'll continue to do that until he rapes my fucking mind into a fine dust. And then I'll give up. In the meantime, we decided to honor one of our viewers by making a list, as he requested, of my top 10 favorite Dean Koontz books. Now, I will promise you that Fear Nothing is not going to be in this list because it fucking stinks.
That deserves to be in the list of worst books of all time.
And Life Expectancy, it just got short.
Yep.
Because it sucked. But, and I'm also going to tell you, with the exception of one book, none of these books will be books that came out after Fear Nothing.
Shit!
You know, namely because
they suck.
Yeah, after Fear Nothing,
that's
as aforementioned in the other video. Yeah, I just kind of
you were like, I'm out.
Had to give up a little there. Although I have read some of that stuff, and they still didn't make the list.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, let's start with our number 10. Let's do this little countdown motion. And my number 10 is Midnight. And I gotta say, I kind of like, again, going on my memory here, I kind of knew this was going to be number 10.
Because you hate it.
No, because it's just not as good as the other ones, which is why it's number 10. See how that makes sense?
I mean,
but
as far as good ones go, it's the 10th good.
That's that's not to say it's not pretty cool, man. And with Koontz, it's always a guarantee that you're going to get a page turner, and this definitely was that. And Midnight has to do with the town of Moonlight Cove. We get a variety of perspectives, but ultimately it boils down to this. It's being attacked by a bunch of weird-ass creatures, and we find out that these creatures are the result of an experiment that is trying to perfect the human race, but has resulted in this form of regression, and they've turned into their more primal instinct. And it was really neat little aspect, and it was the first time that I had like a full-on sci-fi feel from Koontz, while it's still very much steeped in the thriller horror kind of angle. But yeah, pretty neat concept and a pretty neat novel in the end. Next up at number 9 is TikTok, and this got to be the first time that I saw a Koontz book that went. Now there might have been an instance before, but this was the first time I was aware of it. A Koontz book that went direct to paperback.
Oh, shit!
Now this happened when he was, Owen West and Lee Nichols and one of his other pseudonyms.
Yeah, they don't count.
But as Koontz, I think this was the first time. And I remember it's going straight to paperback. That's like going straight to DVD.
Yep.
This is going to suck. And I started reading it, and I got to be honest, at first I was like, I'm not into this.
Oh.
But then it kind of hooked me. I'll say that because this is not a straightforward horror book. It's not a straightforward sci-fi book. It's not anything like he usually did. The themes are there. The carry-out is there. But this is a comedy above anything else. And it took me off guard because of that. But once I got into the groove of it, I really enjoyed it. And it has to do with this, I believe he is a Vietnamese-American guy called Tommy Phan, who is saddled with a mother that's very traditionalist. And one day, and he's very Americanized, mind you. And so there's a little conflict there. But one day, he gets this fucking doll, this tiny little mannequin on his front step. And it has, kind of looks like the little doll on the cover there, stitched up eyes, stitched up hands. And he finds it a bit curious, brings it in. But soon the stitches started popping. And a weird little gremlin or something comes out of it.
Shit!
And it relentlessly pursues him as it grows and distorts and becomes something bigger, right? And he is not sure from whence it came, who has it out for him, what the fuck this thing is, but it's all rooted in who he identifies as. And it actually comes up to a very fulfilling ending, and it has a lot to do, again, with his roots as a Vietnamese person. And but the big thrust of this was that it had a lot of humor. I mean, Elvis is in the fucking thing, for Christ's sake.
Right.
But it was actually really fun and really enjoyable to read, and hoot and holler. And I gotta say, I kind of chuckled a few times. Now I wonder, will I still laugh at the stuff in here nowadays? Maybe not.
Now,
but I sure did back then.
I do have a history with TikTok, and that every time I looked for the tick, this would come up, and it pissed me off. That's my input.
Tick to the talk to the tickety tick tock.
Oh, yep. I also want to say he was still looking badass in this one.
Yeah, he was. I have one where he was not looking that badass here, but anyway.
Oh man, Vaseline that lens.
My next one here is.
It's not Dean Koontz. It's Dean R. Koontz.
This is when he was calling himself Dean Ray Koontz, and it's Darkfall, and again a thriller of sorts with some very heavy supernatural elements. And it has to do with, again, various storylines, various characters, but it all comes down to these attacks, these weird bestial attacks in this town. And one of our characters believing that they're rooted in the supernatural. And as it turns out, that is in fact the case, as there is this a voodoo priest that is summoning creatures from beyond, if you will. And I gotta tell you, the details beyond that escaped me at the time. But I remember when I read this, I was like, man, this is fucking cool. And again, like Koontz, they're page turners. You know, they're relentless. Like you start reading it, and chances are you're just going to read it through in one sitting. And again, I remember very little from it, but I remember thinking, damn, that was badass. And I remember thinking the villain was cool as hell. You know, just a really unique aspect. And, you know, voodoo in supernatural fiction and movies and stuff like that is so rarely used, that added a little extra
like,
streak.
oh, it's got some vood.
Yeah.
It's my dude.
I did not say that, but there we go. Now my number 7 is actually a rewrite of an original, a previous book he wrote back in the 70s, I believe. So this is the rewritten version.
Which he does occasionally.
Yeah, he does occasionally go back into his catalog and just completely rewrite stuff that he feels doesn't meet his standards anymore, and or could have been better. Now, back in the day, he used to novelize stuff a lot, but since he is prone to doing what he wants, or at least was, he would usually just add stuff to novelizations. And that's kind of what happened, to the point where he did that with the original Demon Seed, upon which a movie is based, or you could argue vice versa. It's really unclear, but it doesn't matter, because this Demon Seed, he's completely refurbished into something new. And again, what he's done here is made something that, yes, is kind of a techno thriller and pays a lot of homage to what was originally there, but now has a lot of darkly comic facets to it, you know. So I actually ended up laughing loudly at myself because I'm a fool.
Yep.
I ended up laughing out loud quite a number of times. There's just a lot of really well crafted humor in this. Again, don't know if that still holds up, but yeah, this is the source of the infamous Ina Schenk incident from that we mentioned in our previous video. But this story has to do with a woman who, because of circumstances, decides to kind of become a recluse and has this custom-built security system wherein which she basically sees no need to leave her home, and the security system is an AI. You know, it's fully conscious, and it develops kind of an obsession with her. You know, it becomes basically like a jealous boyfriend, and shuts her in, and she kind of ends up in the place where she started to begin with, you know. And this leads to many a thrilling sequence, and again, some interestingly humorous aspects, because they do tackle the idea of relationships and jealousy and all that stuff through a machine.
Yep.
So yeah, this was actually pretty neat.
Hilariously recreated in The Simpsons.
Yeah, it really was. Back before The Simpsons sucked.
We got a
Dean Koontz without a mustache in the back.
I gotta say, he's not looking too bad there, though.
Yeah, this is before he completely lost the look.
It's still not good, though.
Now, my number 6 is Mr. Murder. This is one of the ones he's most renowned for. And ironically, it's one of the ones also that brought him some controversy because a lot of people felt it was a rip on Stephen King's The Dark Half.
Your boy,
Yeah.
King.
Now, there are similarities, but Stephen King's book is a lot more psychological and based in something supernatural, whereas this one is kind of like a thriller with some sci-fi accents. And in the end, you know what? I actually kind of prefer Mr. Murder.
Ooh.
It reads faster, it's leaner, it's meaner. The villain is pretty interesting, but basically it's a doppelganger story, you know? A guy's life is thrown asunder by the entrance of a person that looks and acts like him, but has other motives. And yeah, it was actually pretty neat. The villain, the titular Mr. Murder, I guess, is pretty interesting, and it was a blast to read. Now, my number 5, I don't have a copy of.
Oh.
This is one that gave me hope for Dean Koontz again, and it's the only one post Intensity that I have liked, and that is the book Innocence. And the book Innocence, I think the reason it was so good is because it touched on a lot of the values that Koontz holds dear to his heart. You know, he's not very open about a lot of stuff, but it's very evident from Innocence that he has a lot of morals, and you could kind of tell that from a lot of the other books. You know, his heroes are heroes, and his villains are villains. His villains are never the type of villain that you kind of like. You know, there's no Jokers in his universe. Joker's a despicable character, but you kind of like him, even though you know he's despicable. That's never the case with his bad guys. They might be great bad guys, but you never like them. You want to throttle them. And Innocence, it doesn't have that quality, but it presents the morals of goodness. And it was really, really excellent. It reminded me a lot of Twilight Zone episode. I don't want to reveal too much of it because it really is worth reading. And it all depends on this big reveal at the end. And to tell you about the book is to tell you about the reveal. Suffice it to say, it's about a man that has been tuckered away from civilization.
Oh yeah, you told me about
Yeah,
that.
and only lives at nighttime,
Yeah.
basically. And it's kind of like the Phantom of the Opera. He stays in the shadows, stays away from society, lives at nighttime, lives underground the city, and he finally comes across someone that he feels a kinship with, and together they go on a journey that ultimately leads not only to them coming across some severe problems and some antagonists, but it ultimately leads to a reveal of why this man hides himself from us. And what is ultimately revealed is actually pretty fucking badass. And again, reminds me a lot of a Twilight Zone episode, only with a more moral and kind of spiritual bent. It was a really good book. Excellent. I would have put it higher in the list, but I took 1 point off because it is post Fear Nothing.
So it has this.
So you know, yeah. So you know that immediately afterwards he wrote something that's not as good.
Yeah.
But this one, it felt like he cared about what was going on, and it showed, and it was really excellent.
This was one of the ones he actually wrote.
Yeah, he didn't shop it out to someone else. Now the next one is if I remember correctly, this is the first Dean Koontz book that I read. And first of all, I just got to point out that this picture of him in the dust jacket is pretty badass.
It's pretty great, holding a tree, as one does.
I know if I ever publish a book, I'm gonna hold me a tree in the back.
Yep.
But anyway, Dragon Tears is the first one that I read from him, and I knew from that point forward that I was gonna read him forever. Lo and behold, I didn't expect that Fear Nothing would come along and ruin that. But yeah, Dragon Tears is the story of two cops, and they're kind of opposites. One is very ordered, and the other one is kind of haphazard. But, we focus more on the ordered one and his view of the universe. And then they come across a supernatural serial killer, basically, called TikTok. Has no relation to the other TikTok. And TikTok is, in essence, what would happen if a sociopath had superpowers. And this guy has a wide range of them. He can appear and disappear anywhere. He can look like anything. He could stop time. and it's pretty neat, man. It basically gives a deadline to our main characters. You're gonna die. Time's a ticking, hence the name, I guess. And yeah, it's just a pulse pounding chase to the end. Some really great action set pieces in it that still in my mind stick out so fresh, you know. And I think this would be a great one to bring into the cinematic format. It would be pretty interesting to see. So anyway, Dragon Tears is my number 4. My number 3 is The Bad Place. I was kind of having a hard time putting this number 3, but the first 2 are so good that I had no choice but to, I guess. But this could easily be my number 2. The Bad Place centers around a gentleman who appears and out of nowhere, you know, just there's that guy right there, and he seems to have no conscious memory of who he is, or I should say of his past, other than his name.
Enos Schenk?
And then, thankfully it is not Enos Schenk or Leilani Klonk, but slowly we begin to find out about this guy's past. And the interesting is the more we find out not only about his past, but about his abilities. He seems to be able to teleport between places and or possibly times. And what we end up finding out about him is tied into his family, and it opens a door to an assortment of antagonists that are just as unique as our main character. And then that actually ends in a super tragic way for our main characters. It's kind of sad, but yeah, this was a really unique blend of something. Yeah, it is supernatural, but it kind of didn't ever feel like a horror book. It has a very unique taste of its own. But yeah, it's one of those where you're just interested to find out more and more about this character and why and from whence he comes. And then when you do find out, you're like, whoa, now I have more to find out about these people and these events. So it's pretty interesting. Again, won't reveal too much of it because it's totally worth the read to find out exactly what is going on. But that's why The Bad Place is my number 3. My number 2 is a longtime favorite of mine, Phantoms. And Phantoms is kind of like, it kind of starts off kind of like The Blob, sort of, you know.
Beware of the Blob.
It sleeps and it creeps and it sucks. But yeah, man, Phantoms.
That's worth it.
Phantoms is about really it centers itself around the historically prevalent events of mass disappearances. But it starts off with the disappearance of one town in, I forgot where, somewhere in the fucking U.S. Anyway, all the people disappear. These 2 sisters are returning to town and they find that everybody in the town is gone, with a few exceptions, and slowly the mystery begins to unravel and we tap into the bigger implications of it. Now, there was a movie adaptation of this that was fairly decent. I actually enjoyed the movie adaptation quite a bit, but I think it's, despite being fairly decent, it didn't capture the fullness of the villainous entity, because it's pretty fucking epic. You know, again, I don't want to ruin that for any potential readers that haven't touched on this book yet, but when you get to understand exactly what is causing this disappearances, not only in this occasion, but throughout history, and why, it's pretty fucking awesome, man. And it explains via its own story a lot of the events that happened throughout history and why, you know, a lot of the big bad events throughout history. It's pretty awesome, pretty interesting. I absolutely love this book. This is probably the one that I've read the most from him. Yeah. Didn't
the hit film have suffer from late 90s, early 2000s poster syndrome?
Yeah, the hit. Damn it! Now you got me saying it was a hit. It was not a hit, but yeah, I did have that poster. You know, the Scream poster with all the
people just standing,
pretty looking people just looking. But yeah, check out if you're too lazy to read the book.
I remember liking it. I haven't seen it in forever, but I remember liking it when I saw it.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting one to revisit.
Yeah,
because, you know, again, yeah, it's more like I remember liking it, but it could
early 90s, early 2000s. So.
But yeah, man, it does do a fair job at representing what's in the book. I'll say that. You know what I'm saying? But if you really want to get the meat of it, this is where to go. Easily one of the coolest bad guys And that's really being general there that I've read. Speaking of bad guys, my number one Koontzer, that's what I'm calling them now.
Koontzers is what they're called?
Is Intensity. Now, that's a shitty-ass cover.
It's not great.
But Intensity is easily his best book. Now, again, that could have changed over time. He might have written something else post Fear Nothing. Fear Nothing.
We're going on the ones you've read.
But
right?
This is long held by many to be his best book. And my minimal research has kind of, attested to that people still consider this his best book. And this is one where the title is very appropriate. It is an intense read. Now, just a little bit of trivia here. When the movie Switchblade Romance, aka High Tension, came out, a lot of people accused it of being just a ripoff of Intensity. And in a lot of ways, it kind of is. It definitely took a lot from it. Now, Alexander Aja, the director and writer, was approached about this and asked, and he denied any knowledge of Dean Koontz's Intensity. And Dean Koontz was asked about it, and he said, yeah, it's pretty much the book. But you know what? Considering they mostly fuck up my books, I'm okay with that.
Shit!
So that's
Koontzzy!
Koontzer. Now, that being said, this is better than High Intensity. Than High Tension. There was a TV movie that was made of this. Don't watch that. It's not that great. But Intensity is fucking awesome. And it's about this woman who has a past with abuse. And she finds comfort in her friends, family, and her company. And soon they are assaulted by a guy named Edgar Vess. And it's basically them trying to get away from Edgar Vess from that point forward. And some cool little reveals and twists come up as the book, goes forward. And we find out something about Vess, that he has, it's not necessarily a power, but he experiences things in a different way. He senses things. His senses are elevated to the point where he experiences things in a much more intense way. One of the reasons it's called that. But then there's also kind of like a pseudo relationship that forms between him and the person he's assaulting, our main character. Nothing like High Tension's ultimate reveal, but that kind of bond is suggested here. But yeah, this is easily his best book. Still a great read. I reread this in prison, and it still is fucking excellent. So that's my top 10. Yep. What do you think?
I don't know. I haven't read any of them.
Well, I think you should.
I probably should.
Have you ever tried reading Koontz book?
Nope.
I think if you started to try to read one, it just has that effect. Well, I should say the ones that count.
Yeah. They have that at the Goodwill. I might pick it up.
Yeah, you should. They just have a way of getting you into it real quick. They just wrap you up, suck you in, and they are page turners. You want to know what happens next. So Koontz used to be on top of his game, and that's
now
the top
he's
10.
Super lame.
Yeah. Some worthy mentions: Strangers, Watchers, also very good books.
Did you mention Watchers? Because it's right there.
Oh yeah, it is. No, but it is an excellent book, and it's one of. I know a lot of people would have put Watchers in their top 10 list. Don't watch the movie. I know that the movie has a lot of fans, but don't watch it. It's not good. But yeah, Strangers and Watchers are some worthy mentions. I also really like the Odd Thomas series, but more for the characters.
Yeah.
Because he does write some really charming characters. He does have a tendency to write good guys that you care about, and that's kind of a skill of its own. That even when he writes shitty books,
you're like, that guy was a pretty cool guy.
Yeah, he's never lost that. He's written likable protagonists, and that's kind of something that people find hard to do nowadays. Writing a good guy that matters.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like a lost skill now. Now the bad guys are the focus of everything. So kudos to him on that. But anyway, this has been my top 10 list. What are yours? And why is it not Fear Nothing? I'll tell you why, because it sucks. But this has been Ahab. That's the Goon Tick. Top 10. Hit like, share, subscribe. And those notifications.
What is this?
I don't know where they are in the screen, so I'm just pointing everywhere.
Yeah.
You can stop this whenever you
I
want.
could, and I will.